Hey everyone, we're here for another episode of Faith Life
Unscripted.
We're pretty excited to be here today with our friends, Nic and Anna-Claire. We were blessed to be able to walk them through pre-marital counseling, and I actually officiated their wedding 6 weeks ago. So we are excited to have them on. We're going to talk about some of the struggles that you go through today in dating and what it's like to be newly married. So we're going to dive right in. So speaking of us taking you guys through premarital counseling and walking with you guys through that, what are some things that you took from it? Why do you think that helped you to prepare for your marriage?
Well, I thought it was really good. Going into it, I wasn't really sure how I was going to go, but it ended up being a lot deeper than I thought, especially with the syllabus that the church had us go through.
Yeah.
It just dove really, really deep, which the syllabus is, you kind of take this test and it basically spits out all this information about you and your partner. And it was very, very accurate, almost scary accurate.
Was anything surprising to y'all when you took that assessment?
That's the thing. It's like we kind of expected everything. Like it would say something deep about the other person. And I would be like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Like, yep, I get that. But the syllabus was just really, really good. It explains just what your partner needs when it comes to their strengths and their weaknesses. Like I know one thing for me was like, don't go into an argument trying to win it or trying to be right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, every time we get in an argument, I'm just wanting to be right.
Oh, yeah.
Like at that point, I would rather be right than find the solution,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
which obviously is not what you want.
Yeah. Either way, it's like I've said before, either way, you're not winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That along with the book that went with it was really good. I'm really glad you had us read that book.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to read before and after, probably like a refresher after
Mm-hmm.
you get
Yeah,
married,
yeah.
because there's just a lot of stuff that, might not necessarily apply to you before you're married, and then it might apply to you after. So,
Even going into it, I didn't really know what I was going to learn. I was like, yeah, we got this. We're doing pretty good. We don't have very many arguments.
yeah.
And then I'm reading this book and trying to be honest with myself. I'm like, yeah, I could do that better.
Yeah.
Well, that's basically the whole reason we want to walk through premarital counseling, is because we want to find problems before you get married. And then, you get married and 3 weeks in, you're like, I didn't know you did this and I hate this. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're having trouble. So it was a good time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you recall from premarital counseling that led you to a better understanding of the realities of marriage?
It helped me learn a lot about her and her feelings, where her identity is, who she is as a person.
Mm-hmm.
We went through it fairly early. So I felt like we'd already started working in some of those things before we were married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, my time and my hobbies and what she needs and what I need. So I felt like it really helped us before we got married.
Yeah.
Which we're obviously really thankful for.
Yeah.
So
One of the other things we did with you guys was we went through vertical marriage,
Mm-hmm.
and then also we went through Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think those two things were good catalysts for a healthy marriage from the start.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. We're still doing the Every Dollar app that they had you do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We
we're-
do still use that.
Like we went through our budget before, and if we would have gone to that class, we would have never been putting a budget together this early in our marriage.
Yeah.
I would have never done it before we got married, and we wouldn't have done it now. So when we did start doing it, like it would have been very chaotic. But having all that really helped. Like just not that long ago, we were going through it like, well, we don't really know how much we're going to spend on this, but let's
Yeah.
just throw an amount out there and we'll see how it goes.
Which we're still a month and a half in, so there's still more.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But it was just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about the dynamic since you've got married? Has that dynamic changed in your relationship, coming home to each other every day?
I think it's great.
Yeah. It's great. I like you better as a husband than I liked you as a fiance.
Yeah, she told me the other day she likes me better as a husband than a boyfriend. I was like, that's better than to like me better as a boyfriend than a husband.
Yeah, I like
So,
you
yeah.
better as a husband.
For a while now, like every time we see somebody new, they're like, what's your favorite part of being married? And I'm like, honestly, it's coming home and just being able to be home.
Yeah.
We come home from work and we're just there.
We don't have to figure out plans like who's going to whose house.
There's no like,
I just have a plan for supper, or he has a plan
Yeah.
for supper.
and we're just there. We're at
Yeah.
home.
There's no orchestrating and planning everything and planning when we're going to see each other next and worrying about that.
Yeah.
What's been some of the highlights of your marriage so far?
Honestly, I can't remember who I was telling this the other day, but sometimes at night we're just laying in bed going to sleep or whatever. Like we'll just lay there and talk. You know, there's no lights. You know, we're about to go to sleep. We'll just talk about whatever. Or I'll start making some stupid jokes, and we start laughing. That's honestly been one of my favorite parts.
Yeah. Me too. That's one of my favorite things.
It's cool learning, you know, on one hand, how many times I've cooked before I got married, and now I've probably doubled that. Yes.
Yeah.
But now, like, just doing that, I think it really is a lot of fun.
Well, it's really cool because it's a way you can serve her as a husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been another thing that's really been motivating for me is like, yeah, I can get all this done, and when she comes home, she doesn't have a whole meal to worry about cooking.
And don't stop doing that. Like, it might seem old the longer you're in your marriage, but don't stop. Because that's literally like a form of romancing her.
Yeah.
Preparing a meal.
Yep. I don't know how many times I told you, like, the other night that how much I appreciated that you cooked dinner.
Obviously, only 6 weeks in, but it was even less than that, where she was like, yeah, your love language is definitely acts of service.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'll just start cleaning or...
There was a lot of stuff, like, when we were dating that I couldn't see because his love language is acts of service, and we weren't together all the time. So that definitely bleeds over into being married and now, like, doing a great job at that.
Keep it up. So this could be like prior to marriage and after marriage, but how do you guys handle conflict?
This is something I was just thinking about the other night. I can't remember what it was, but we got into some kind of conflict, you know, nothing crazy. But I think before we got married, we wouldn't have even been together during the conflict. It would have been probably over text, which would have made it worse.
It's always escalating.
Then it's like, all right, I'm going to bed. In my head, I'm like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm going to sleep.
Yeah.
And the other night,
you could run from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like, it was just like, all right, whatever, it'll blow over. Well, the other night, I don't remember what it was, but we got to that point, or normally over text.
It was very mild. It really wasn't anything.
Yeah, but it was enough to...
It was enough for us
be so aggravated.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where normally if we were separate, I would just, like you said, ran from him.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I could either do that here and go to bed mad at each other, or we can do this right now, deal with it.
Yeah. And he did the right thing, and he said we shouldn't go to bed mad at each other.
Yeah.
So
it's good. It reminded me of one of the best things I've heard Pastor Kyle say is there's marriage where they hate each other. And it's like, how did you get there? It's not one big problem. It's very small decisions just made over time.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if we go to bed mad here over something that doesn't really matter, and it probably will blow over the next day, and we probably won't even think about it again, but that becomes a habit, and eventually, you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts kind of thing.
Absolutely. Another thing about it is what ends up happening is typically one spouse or another will start bringing up those little things that have happened. And that's what's really dangerous, is when you start bringing up the things that have happened because you haven't dealt with it. You haven't talked through it.
Yeah.
And so it's still something that's inside of you.
Holding on to resentment.
Hold on to it. And then, exactly. It causes resentment. And so that's what's really dangerous is like I've said in every single marriage podcast. So I'll make sure I say it in this one. When you handle conflict early and often, it's healthy. Conflict is good.
Yeah.
It's when you don't have conflict
and
that it festers inside. You start resenting your spouse, and then nobody does anything about it. It just stays there. And I've talked to some folks with some different marriage issues lately, and I talked to one couple that fight all the time, but they get to a point where they'll just run from it. They'll just fight, and then they'll shut down. And so it's super important to finish the fight. You know, I mean, in the best sense of the word, don't give up on it. That's dangerous. Finish the fight. And there's so much more that could be said for that. But especially like what we worked with you, Nick, you don't always have to be right. And so sometimes finishing the fight is saying, you know what, this is not worth me being right at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Because I've just realized that everything we've been arguing about just boils down to my pride. I just want to be right and I want to prove that. And when you get to the point in your marriage where you're mature enough, and I'm working on it, I'm not there, but you're mature enough and you can say, you know what, I'm just going to let her be right, even though I know she's wrong. It's okay. I'm just going to let her be right. That's when you say, okay, this is really about love and not about myself. It's all about serving your spouse. And sometimes the way you serve your spouse is cooking. Other times the way you serve your spouse is letting them be right when maybe they're not. And it's like the question I ask you and a lot of the guys a lot is like, is it eternal?
It's
not. let's let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say it was a vertical marriage, and it was almost like a rule: do not go to bed mad at each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Vertical
Yeah.
marriage.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
And the other night it was late. I was like, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
That was actually one of the little old lady we mentioned in the second episode. That was one of the things she told us was do not go to bed angry. It was like
It
in
might
her
be
top
that.
5.
Well, what are some practical ways you guys keep God at the center of your marriage?
Well, we regularly attend church community group. We're in community. We're both in separate, like a smaller men's group and a women's group within our community group. And we both do our best to stay in the Word and stay in our devotionals and try to keep our lives centered around it.
Yeah.
Not just checking off the list.
You can't do it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think maybe one of the biggest lessons I've learned since joining Two Cities Church and being in a group and stuff is you can't do it alone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That was when we had not been together that long. But now being married, you can't do any of it alone.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good.
You've got to have people. You've got to have a fairly big group of people like our normal community group that meets. And then you got to have our small group of men
Mhm.
where you can be, how does Kyle say it? Private, but not something.
Secretive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I would first admit that we could do a better job of praying together.
Yeah.
I've heard other pastors talk about how just amazing it is. I've asked you how you do it, and we have a little bit. It's mainly,
We do try to. We're not as good at it as we should be. We don't do it as much as we should.
Yeah. That's either. Yeah. I mean,
It is something that we try to do. But sometimes it can be a little awkward at first and praying out loud with each other. But
Yeah.
it's mainly when one of us is having some sort of struggle,
yeah.
mhm.
just with everyday life or really anything. But it's awkward at first.
Or I'll ask him to pray for me or vice versa, and we'll just do it right there.
Yeah.
More of like praying it over, not I'll say a prayer in my head.
And
I think that's more powerful.
Another thing I'll say is the other day when we went to church, she was serving, taking pictures. I was sitting by myself. I was next to somebody, but it wasn't her, and it felt a lot different. Not being next
Working
to her.
together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
being in church worshiping together. I guess I took it for granted because we'd always done it together since we started attending Two Cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually the way that we do it is that you will come to attend the one that I'm attending after I serve or something.
Mhm.
But that was the first time that I went and served at the one that he was going to also.
Yeah, and I didn't realize, man, there's a lot of value in worshiping and sitting under preaching together.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good.
That's something I always enjoy, especially if you're gone for the weekend or something.
Yeah.
I miss you being there.
So, as a couple who was rooted in Christ, what kind of struggles did you face dating in today's culture?
We'll start off with, it's not easy trying to follow what God's word says through the dating process. If anybody who's ever done it tells you it's easy, they're lying.
Sure.
It is a struggle. Thankfully, our parents led us in the right direction. We didn't want to move in together.
Yeah.
You know,
It wasn't the Lord's plan.
It wasn't the biblical thing to do.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
So we just weren't going to do it.
It would have made things seemingly easier, but in the long run.
Yeah. It's like we've talked about before. You don't want to look at it as a test run.
Sure.
You find the person that you agree with them about the most important things. And obviously there's other things you have to love them, you have to be attracted to them, that kind of thing. But you have all that in common and you get married and then you figure out everything else, a living situation.
Mm.
You just figure it out because you love each other and you agree about all those things and you're committed to it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So keeping that in mind definitely helps. And it's very, very tough when everything out there is telling you the opposite.
Sure.
Mhm.
It is.
Absolutely.
Well, like, there are so many things that, you don't get to experience as just a couple who's dating, who's not living together, that other couples are experiencing. And it seems like that could be helpful to some
Right.
people,
Yeah.
but it's not biblical. It's not the way God designed it.
Yeah.
And so we have to look at is that God's grace will meet us there.
I've had people ask, why do we do what we do? Why aren't we moving in together if that makes it easier? Well,
Yeah.
that's because the way that God has planned it out and the way that it's ordained is that's what's best for us. And He's written it to be for our benefit.
Yeah, I think there's two ways that I typically hear about people thinking about it and looking at it. One is, well, we're not having intercourse,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're living together and we feel like we're fine. Well, that's really dangerous
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because what you're doing is you're taking the intimacy out of the relationship, right?
Right.
And so there's a healthy dose of intimacy that is necessary for people who are dating.
Yeah.
You want that to be kind of like a magnet coming together and you have to hold them apart.
Mm.
But it's necessary for you to want each other and love each other
Right.
and long for that honeymoon, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you're living together and you say, well, we're not having sex, which is rarely the case, then you're just taking all that intimacy away. And then when you start losing that, when you become married, that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other way is when you want to test the water.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah, I've heard that.
How many times have you heard that, right?
Yeah.
So we want to test the waters. Like, how do you know if you can live with somebody if you've never done it before? You should try that out.
I mean, if we were living together and we were not married, it would be a lot easier for me to be like, I'm mad at you. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to leave. Because there's no connection keeping us together. There's nothing holding us or binding us to each other.
You could just turn around and walk away.
Yeah.
You've lost nothing.
Right. And that's easy for some people. It's the easy way to be together these days. They always talk about in our generation how people are older and they're waiting longer and longer to get married. And you're like, why?
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's easy to get out of.
I keep bring up another thing. Pastor Kyle said it was like getting married was supposed to be the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
It was supposed to be the beginning of everything else.
Yep.
And now everybody looks at it as the end.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
It's
right.
the end of your freedom.
Yeah.
Right.
It's actually the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we have to look at God's word and see how he ordained it.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give other couples, young couples that are dating in today's society and looking towards marriage to stay healthy and Christ-centered in their marriage or in their relationship?
You just have got to get into church.
That healthy Bible believing and God fearing church, not just any church.
So you absolutely have to, 100%. There is no excuse or substitute. Now, if you're long distance, or if one person's off at college, like we did that, there's other circumstances.
That is hard though.
Yeah, if that presents its own challenges, that's one thing.
And get into church and go together to the same church and try to get plugged into community in that church and get in your own individual men's and women's groups.
Yeah.
Because there's things that will come up that you can't talk about to your boyfriend or girlfriend that you need to have other women and other men to be able to talk about with, especially like when you're dating, there's a lot of stuff that you face.
Yeah. And on that note, Anna-Claire, I know that you and Chelsea and a couple other girls have a group and you have really had some good, deep conversations. Can you go into how that's helped you, how that helped prepare you for marriage? Just having that time with like-minded Christian women, how did that help you?
It's good to have people my age and someone with more experience and someone who's been married longer and the other women in our group too, to hear them talk about their experience with being married and to hear their wisdom that they've gathered throughout the years. Because if you have a group of just younger girls like me or unmarried or just married, there's no one to pour into you.
Right.
So I think that it's been really helpful because you've been married longer and we've got different ages, and I think it's been a really good thing. Yeah.
And I think it'll continue to be increasingly important as you are married.
Yeah.
Because you'll start facing the things that Chelsea went through or some other woman went through.
Right.
Early in her
I think a lot of marriages have very similar challenges. The specifics are different, but there's financial issues. There's like feelings issues. There's, he's not loving me the right way. And they're all similar. And I think that's helpful to help each other when you have similar issues that someone else has gone through.
Yeah, I think that God definitely puts people in your path on purpose. I know he does. I know he does.
Yeah.
In order to help you walk through those things, because that's the whole thing about providence. It's like you go through certain things to be able to help people younger or later on in your life when you didn't really know why you were going through something. Well, you went through it to be able to help walk this other person through that same struggle or whatever it was. So, yeah.
Good old windshield rear view mirror.
Yeah. And I was actually thinking this time, your test is always a testimony.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it that way, when you see a test, you need to know that it's going to be a testimony.
Yeah.
How do y'all plan on continuing to nurture your marriage as you're facing new challenges and experiences?
I'll definitely be consulting you in our group. Like I said at the beginning, you have to do it with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be like, Chelsea.
Yeah, obviously neither one of us have been married. And we're only, 24, 25.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have the answers. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to do stupid stuff and say stupid things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
So going to somebody who we look up to, going to other guys and being able to get it out and talk about it.
Sure.
And also, I think being able to apologize.
Oh, yeah. Like the first to offer grace.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Be the first to offer grace and apologize, which is much easier said than done.
Oh, yeah. Me first.
The first thing I said was about going into an argument, not wanting to be right, but actually want to look for a solution, which takes a lot of swallowing your pride.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Anna-Claire, what do you think?
I feel like one of the biggest things for me is just staying in the Word and trying to live out my life imitating Christ. I feel like is one of the best ways, because that helps me get in the mindset of serving and putting his needs before mine, not being so selfish all the time, and just gets you in that mindset of giving him grace. And
like, it's not just you anymore. It's you and him are now one.
Yeah, we're working together on this. So we have to.
We're not on different teams.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not all about me. It's not all about him. It's about us working together towards the same goal. And that's a big part of that is giving grace and putting him before me, dying to yourself.
Yeah.
So we talk about it a little bit, especially with you, Anna-Claire. This will be a good chance for Nic to get to talk about our men's group, but what role has community played in your marriage and in your relationship so far?
Just having somebody to go to. I grew up an only child and also didn't exactly want to just go spew everything to my parents.
Right.
A lot of it I just kept in. And so now, that's obviously carried over. So just getting comfortable trying to go to you guys for just whatever.
Yeah.
Vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, being vulnerable for sure. It was like the first time I did it, it was like trying to, just drag it out of myself to get myself to do it. Because I just like, I don't want to do it.
Well, as an only child, you're so used to like taking care of everything yourself because you don't, like you said, you don't want to go to your parents and you have no like older sibling or even a younger sibling to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, going to your parents about something like it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There was never that older sibling to go to that kind of thing for. But now having you guys, just getting comfortable trying to just talk about whatever it may be, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
I think. Me and Josh have talked about like how did we survive before having a group to go to. Small group to really get deep. How did we ever get through anything?
Yeah.
It just bottle things up.
Yeah.
You need that community to be able to talk through things and be sounding boards for each other and just, this is how I dealt with this, and to be able to point each other to the Word of God. Yeah. I know that's what we're doing in our groups, but I think that's one of the most important things about community is that we all share the same belief. We can all point each other back to that essential belief.
It's a good word. I think one thing that I try to do is be vulnerable first. As I ask questions, I try to ask the question and then give my struggle first. A lot of times I'll say, while you're thinking about it, let me tell you my struggle in this area.
Yeah.
And try to be vulnerable first, because that typically opens up everybody else. Because you'll have one guy who's vulnerable or gal, and then the next one feels more comfortable, and the next one. And then finally, usually it's always towards the end, the one who really needed to open up will open up. And then an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours in, you're like, man, this could go on for another hour and I'm good with it because this needed to come out. This is something that needed to come to light. And this is something that we can really work through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Anna-Claire was in our group, our community group, when it first started, the first Two Cities Lexington group. And it was about 8 months in. Nic came home from West Virginia, and Anna-Claire brings him to group. I think one of the biggest things that really prepared you guys for marriage was being in community.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And y'all both have been such like an integral part of this group. Like me and Matthew are very blessed to have y'all in our group and in our lives.
Yeah, I agree.
That's awful nice.
And I don't say this from a place of pride, obviously. I say this from a place of repeating you, but I know you guys feel like we've been a blessing to you, but we feel the same, but we feel that you guys have been a blessing to us because it has called us up in our marriage. If we're going to talk about the standard, well, we need to be living the standard first.
Yeah, definitely.
And so we've been talking in podcasts about marriage. It's given us a very clear awareness of where our marriage is and where we're strong and where we're weak. And we haven't been praying together as a couple as much as we want to.
Yeah. And
so some of those things that we told you guys and advised you and pointed you to the Word are things that have pointed us back to the Word. So We are so grateful for both of you guys.
Thank you.
Well, one final question.
So what are y'all most looking forward to in the near future with your marriage?
Well, eventually buy a house and have kids and another weenie dog, and
Yeah.
Hank needs a little brother eventually. Not right now. He's been really expensive lately.
Yeah.
He's
The point, you got
great.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I really want to try to not look forward too much
Yeah,
and just be where my feet are.
Mhm.
that's good.
That is very true.
Because I think back, when you're growing up, you just always want to be older, right?
Mhm.
You know, you always want to be 18. Then you want to be 21.
Yeah.
Then you want to be married.
Yeah.
Eventually, we're going to look back and be like, man, I wish we were newlyweds again.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So just trying to be where my feet are.
Enjoy
And just
it.
enjoy it. Yeah, enjoy the
Yeah.
moment.
I think it's been
Mhm.
really fun, and
Yeah, not saying there's no goals to work towards.
yeah.
For sure. We eventually would like to not live in a trailer for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, eventually, but it's honestly such a blessing where we're at right now.
Yeah. God's blessed you where you're at.
Definitely blessed us, and we don't have many payments, and so that's just really such a blessing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are easy on us that don't have to be that way.
Right.
Just blessings from the Lord.
Yep. That allow us to save for a house and allow us to save and
Sure.
be able to
So probably
those things in the future.
yeah, just a balance of looking towards the future, moving into a different house, eventually having kids. You know, when is that going to be? That kind of thing. But also just enjoying being married for 6 weeks.
And
Well,
being
and
married.
I want to honor your parents too. Both of your parents pointed you and continue to point you to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And especially as you geared up and got ready for marriage.
Mhm.
And I had the opportunity to talk to both of your dads during the wedding, and just hearing how just grateful they are that you guys have found each other was just, as a dad myself, was just really humbling and just a blessing. So I want to honor your parents in that way and just say, how awesome is it that your parents continue to point you to Christ, that you had parents that loved you enough to have hard conversations sometimes.
Mhm.
And so just grateful for that.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
We're very, very
I
blessed.
couldn't agree more.
And I think we're excited to see where God takes y'all next. So y'all have big hearts, and we're excited for y'all.
You're the first wedding I ever officiated. I could never have another first.
True.
Yep. And it was great.
And I
Perfect.
I plan for it to last forever. Well, folks, I can't think of a better night to do this. I want to honor my wife and tell you that tonight we've been dating for 18 years. So what an awesome night to get together with a couple and just honor marriage. We hope that this podcast helps somebody in their marriage. Maybe gives you a bit of encouragement, a bit of advice, and we're all here for you. We'll always continue to pray for you. This has been an episode of Faith in Life.
Unscripted.
May your faith continue to grow, and may your life be filled with grace and peace. Take care, folks.